Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Focus. This is the special AE 9/11 Truth podcast where we bring on the best of the best in the 9/11 architectural and engineering movement, truth movement. And we're going to be doing sort of a reaction show tonight. We've done them in the past, back when we were debunking Sabin Civil Engineering's video on World Trade Center 7, where they claim that they're debunking us. And if you watched that episode in the past, you're going to see that video didn't really have a lot of teeth to it, that they really didn't address the questions that we were raising. We're going to be doing a similar thing tonight, very respectfully. Anybody that follows AE 9/11 Truth may know that we just interviewed Richard Rotanz, Deputy Commissioner of the OEM. He actually went into Building 7 up to the 8th floor on the day of September 11th and gave his insight. Doesn't agree with our conclusions, but there's a lot of interesting things that came out in that interview that me and Craig McKee did. And we're going to be getting a take on it from architects and engineers, like I said. So let me just go ahead and bring them on in here. Our first person is Kamal Obeid. Of course, he is the chairman here at AE 9/11 Truth, holds a master's degree in civil engineering from the University of California, Berkeley, been a practicing civil and structural engineer in the San Francisco Bay Area since 1980, licensed structural engineer since 85. During his career, he served as an engineer of record on many building design and retrofit projects, specializes in structural steel building analysis, as well as investigating structural failures of steel-framed buildings. He is going to be joined by John Schuler. John is the lead outreach for project due diligence. He's got a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Lehigh University, Master of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and of course is a practicing civil engineer now. And bringing on somebody, because we have a spot to fill, and we got to have three people here with me, right? And I thought, who might be a qualified person to talk about matters of 9/11 World Trade Center evidence, be able to analyze it well. And, I went through a lot of different resumes and stuff, and I thought, who might be a good person? And I think this person might be okay at the job. Of course, we're going to be joined permanently here on The Focus by Mr. Richard Gage, AIA. If you're not aware of who this individual is, he is an architect of 30 years from the San Francisco Bay Area, member of the American Institute of Architects, and founder and former CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He's now independent at richardgage911.org. During his architectural career, he has worked most types of building construction, including numerous fireproof steel frame buildings. Recently, a $400 million mixed-use urban project with 1.2 million square feet of retail, 320,000 square feet of mid-rise office space, and parking structure, altogether consisting of 1,200 tons of steel framing. So he knows what he's been talking about. And of course, he's been all over the world talking about this evidence, countless interviews, and all of that. Founded the organization that we're promoting right now and in the service of. So thank you, Richard, for joining us here on The Focus. Kamal and John, of course, too. So we are going to just jump right into it. What I did here, folks, is I'm not just going to play the interview for you again from beginning to end, because if you want to watch it, you can go to AE 9/11 Truth YouTube channel and watch that. What I did is we're going to cover it based on subjects. So, for instance, like the elevator box that's blown out of the elevator shaft in Building 7. I'm going to use that as an example. What I did is I went through that interview. I found the instances where this is being talked about, and I sort of spliced them all together with a flashy little transition for this audience. And so we're going to watch this stuff today, and we're going to get reactions from the architect and the two engineers here, and they're going to be able to share their thoughts. So what we're going to start with now is this reference to the creaking of the building. I've heard this talked about before with the Twin Towers, not so much with Building 7. This was the first time. Well, let's go ahead and play that clip.
And that was, the biggest part of that day, realizing that later on, the chief of department, Pete Hayden, along with a few other officers, asked me to take two chiefs into Tower 7 to see if it would be viable to commit manpower into that building. And realizing in the back of my head how many guys we lost, not realizing that it was several hundred. I figured maybe 100 guys, maybe 50. I had no idea it was 343 guys. But myself and two chiefs went into Tower 7, we got as far as walking the stairs up the floor 8. And we could hear upstairs the creaking and the creaking sounds of the building getting very weak.
All right, gentlemen, starting with Richard, let's hear your reactions to Building 7 creaking, because I've never heard that before myself.
Yeah, I had heard this, and I imagine that a building that had experienced explosions, which the evidence and the witnesses talk about and show, where 2 or 3 floors had huge holes blown in them, I imagine that would be creaking.
Kamal, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think Richard is the most qualified amongst us here because he knows the entire history, not just the engineering part, which he's very adept at, but also all the evidence. I don't know what happened before what and all of that, but as far as creaking goes, if there were some explosions, creaking is creaking. It doesn't bother me as far as building. He added the statement as building weakening. How does he know that? He's not qualified to make that statement. But the real bigger picture is how did this building collapse? And we all know how it collapsed. If you have creaking in one little area, that's not going to cause it to collapse into its footprint at free fall speed.
John?
Right. I'll echo what Kamal said. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you. Richard, first time I'm doing a show with you. It's great. I don't, that's the first time I had heard that too, Andy, that the building was creaking. Of course, when structures are creaking, something is moving. So something's moving, something's happening. I don't know what it means either. I know, controlled demolition, oftentimes, stairwells are removed in advance, things like that. There are some, obviously, preliminary explosions and things happen. So, and as I guess we'll see with more of these clips, or where it looks like evidence that he's, talking about of, explosions having occurred in the building. So anyway, I don't know what this means yet, but it's fascinating evidence that he goes in there. It must have been very eerie for him to go in there and hear creaking in this empty building.
Yeah, and I've heard references with the Twin Towers. I know for myself personally, I try to go off of evidence that you can see in the videos, and some of the calculations like David Chandler does and stuff like that, because that's something that can be laid bare for everybody to see. It's not based off of an account from what somebody might have heard that day, except for explosions. But there is actual video evidence of explosions going off with those firefighters around the booth. And when Graham McQueen collected the oral histories on that, he was very scientific in how he did this and provided the quotes that he was citing. But again, looking at Building 7 coming down, and there's some dispute that's brought up in this interview regarding the way that it came down that we're going to get into a little bit later on the show. Regarding the way it comes down, even if some portion of this building had given way at one point, it still doesn't account for the way that we saw it come down and the speed with which it came down, or the acceleration with which it came down, and some of the findings from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Again, you need to remove the interior columns and the exterior columns virtually at the same second to make it come down the way that we saw it. So just any comments on what I just said?
Completely agree. The evidence shows, and the Halsey report from Alaska reveals that the only way that a 47-story building can fall symmetrically at free fall into its own footprint is controlled demolition. Fire, especially the fires that we have seen in this building, which are few, they're small, and they're scattered, can't remove all 82 columns in order for there to be no resistance from any of them, which is what free fall means. that not one of those 82 columns gave any resistance for this building's free fall period, which is a third of its 7-second fall.
Right. Now, I may have said this in the beginning, I can't remember, but Mr. Rotanz does not agree with our conclusions, but he also doesn't agree with NIST. Now, this next segment I'm going to play is where there's some dispute with NIST here, and with us, because he's saying that we're not seeing the south side of the building, that there were gaping holes. NIST says that the damage to Building 7 from the fall of Tower 1 was just in one corner of the building. But he's talking about gaping holes all over the south side. So let's go ahead and watch that.
Looking at the south wall, we saw huge gaping holes bigger than Mack trucks and hanging beams and columns. And there was an elevator box that was blown down the hallway out of the elevator shaft. So I don't think people really realized there was gaping holes in Tower 7's facing towards the south, because when one came down, it did a lot of punishment to that. And we said to ourselves, this is going to be coming down. I had no idea when, but we got out, notified the chief that we got to back out because this building is not it's not going to stand that much longer because it got insulted from Tower 1.
Now, also, you said that you've seen gaping holes in the building and columns dangling. Was this just on from looking on the outside in, or was this while you were in the building? Where were the columns broken inside this building?
I was looking from the 8th floor, and every floor we went down to, we saw the exact same thing. You could look up various parts of Tower 7 to see the same thing. Okay,
so, but was it was it far away from the damage from where Tower 1 had hit the building, or was it closer to that damage? Was this kept exclusively towards that area?
Tower 1, when it collapsed, a lot of the Tower 1 fell onto Tower 7 from the 40th floor all the way down. And you had gaping damage throughout the front of that building, which is facing south. You don't have any video of that. That's, the only video you have is looking at the north side of the building when the building came down.
I just wondered, maybe just to go back to the, you mentioned the holes in the south face, and I was getting my south and my north mixed up before. So now I'm a little clearer on what you were saying. I mean, my understanding was that the bulk of the damage from falling debris was kind of on one corner of the building. Did you say that you saw like holes in the middle of the building, or what? Could you sort of describe, I guess, the damage that you saw?
The damage was that there was holes that were made in the front of the building facing south that were bigger than Mack trucks, and some of them were like 3 or 4 floors high and just as wide. And it was, where my vantage point was pretty close towards the center. And that's when we told ourselves, we're getting out of here.
All right. So very important point being brought up. And thankfully, I have Craig there to sort of back me up in the sense of thinking of things that I don't think to ask on there. Having a real journalist really helps. But let's get a reaction to the gaping holes and how much of a game changer this would be if it's true. We'll start with Richard.
I think that can help. I can help with the image that I've got there, Andy, if you want to bring that up.
Sure.
What we're looking at on the left is NIST's analysis of the damage. Now, like Richard Rotanz just said, down near the 8th floor, which is about right here, there are gaping holes, according to NIST, and according to Richard Rotanz. But as you can see, they're close to the corner of the south face, which is here. Now, there's actually a photograph that NIST provides, though some dispute this photograph. And we see down in the lower right corner, if you can see that, some of the damage to the corner. This is the west face here. The south face is over here. That's the face that faced the north tower. So NIST included this damage in their structural analysis down here and up here. Now, what's interesting about this is not where Richard Rotanz was. Richard Rotanz was, where'd he go? Right here we go. This is a floor plan. Can I make it bigger? Yes. Richard Rotanz said he was on the east side. Now the stairwell is right here on the east side of the core. It's really in the center of the building. But the damage was over here on the southwest corner. So if he was looking at openings in the building, they would have been here in the lower left, south corner. But the elevators are indicated by these red boxes. Let's presume that he was talking about the elevators here when he said that an elevator cab had been blown out of its hoistway, and the hoistway wasn't even there. There was just a huge hole in the floor, which would have been right here. But the damage from the north tower was down here in the southwest of the west side of the south building, the south side of the west facade. The west side of the south facade, the south side of the west facade, right here. So the question is his testimony accurate? Not according to NIST. NIST interviewed many witnesses besides Richard Rotanz. And the question we have to ask ourselves as professionals is, can that damage to the southwest corner cause a huge hole in the center of the building such that an elevator shaft was missing? And he's described 2 or 3 floors impacted and missing above him, or you could see columns dangling down. So Craig asked him what could have caused that, and his immediate response was the damage from the North Tower. But he wasn't there when Barry Jennings was there on the 8th floor, and he heard explosions, which were later attributed by NIST to the impacting of the building by the North Tower debris. But it's been confirmed that Barry Jennings' testimony and Michael Hess's testimony, that their experience of this explosion and other explosions in the building was well before the North Tower and the South Tower came down. So that's what I wanted to bring to our attention.
Right. So, and I agree. And there are a lot of other people. And can I remove this from the screen now?
Sure.
Okay. So there are a lot of other statements that were taken. Now, what Rotanz is going to say is that NIST is full of it in this, and that they did not properly document the damage that's all over the south side. Now, I know there's a dispute about that. If there were gaping holes, let's say NIST just completely fumbled this, which is not hard to believe considering what the problems that we found with the NIST report. If there were gaping holes all over the south side, how much of a factor would that be?
A factor in what?
A factor in bringing about the kind of collapse that we saw in Building 7 later.
Go ahead, Kamal.
Okay, thank you. So, the study that Professor Leroy Halsey did actually modeled the holes in the building as well, and he found that obviously that does not cause a collapse of the building, and if that, in addition to some of the elements that NIST said were removed. Also, for example, Comm 79 on the 13th floor, we're talking about way above that. Even with that, the building lurches to the side and does not collapse. So it's not fatal that we've had this gaping hole. And I think NIST arrived at the same conclusion. They couldn't make a collapse with a hole.
Oh, good point. NIST actually was quite clear, if you don't mind putting that up again, Andy, that column 79, which is way over here in the northeast corner of the building, their whole initiation of collapse theory revolves around expanding beams during a hot fire, causing the pushing off of a girder off of this column 79 and having the 13th floor fall on the 12th and so on for 9 floors. So, which they call a progressive collapse, has nothing to do with the damage to the facade, whether on the southwest corner here or even in the center of the building, which they did not identify. So the Kamal's point is very well taken. If you're going to have any kind of a collapse due to the damage to the facade or the interior, as Barry Jennings saw, what happened? We can take that down. As Barry Jennings saw, we would not see the building. Well, if that damage happened, the building would have tipped that way. If you get kicked in the knee, you fall that direction. If a building suffers damage on one side, it falls in that direction. And vice versa. If the northeast corner, column 79, damage would have happened, the building would have fallen in that direction. There's no leg for NIST to stand on here suggesting that the building could fall symmetrically, much less at free fall acceleration into its own footprint, due to either damage scenario that we're talking about here. That
John,
would
any
be
comments?
Controlled demolition.
Any comments?
I certainly agree with Richard and Kamal, on their comments. I will say I like this fellow, Richard Rotanz. I was not aware of him before you interviewed him. And, he seems to me as a very open-minded individual. I think maybe you'll play the clip, but I think he had said he was not familiar with a lot of, the firefighters looking for truth on this. And until a couple months ago, and he said, okay, well, let's look at this. And he was willing to, to look at it and see what was going on. Now, he doesn't agree with our conclusion, but it's like was said, it's hard for me to, when he's talking about what he saw, where exactly it is and things like that. But this picture we see on the screen here, this is from this report. So the damage was very minimal to the exterior of the building or any part of the building with the North Tower's fall. This building, each floor is about an acre in size. It's like it's huge. It's almost a football field, 2/3 of a football field in size, and so this damage is very minimal. And the fact that he might have he was inside the building, and maybe he was describing other damage. I don't know, like Richard was saying. But, he talks about elevator shafts being blown out, things like that, which was not exterior damage. And I believe in Leroy Holsey's report, it shows the FEMA map of the debris field. And this tower was about 100 yards from the North Tower, the North Twin Tower, which sounds like a long way, and it is. But, of course, the North Tower was 1,300 some feet tall. So, but the damage was very light. The debris field was very light where it hit World Trade Center 7. So not a whole lot of structural damage. And of course, the way the towers fell, very peculiar. We still don't know what all went on there, but some large beams were blown far out laterally, and then some debris just disappeared into thin air, apparently. But anyway, so it's, but yeah, he's a good witness. He has a lot of interesting things to say. I think he's open-minded, and it's more evidence to look at.
Yeah, so I think he's a class act because he's added his name to this document right here for calling for a new investigation. I want to ask, though, because you said, not about much debris. Now, what he's describing when he goes in is he's describing debris the size of a car, maybe even bigger, being blown into Building 7 from the fall of Tower 1, so that it's not just on the outside and it's not just causing exterior damage. He's saying that it's blown into the building. At least that's my understanding. What would be the reaction to that?
Well, NIST is showing on the right side here, the south face, they show that smoke had obscured the area above the 15th floor and below the ninth or eighth floor. But so they are able to see the red part here there, and they're identifying that as exterior steel that's been damaged. So consistent with their model, their diagram shows no damage to the right, and yet your point, John, about Richard Rotanz stating that he doesn't agree with our conclusions should be paralleled with his acknowledgement that he hasn't reviewed any of our evidence yet, not even the film calling out Bravo 7, which is all about Building 7 and all about the evidence for its explosive demolition and much other evidence. He hasn't seen our film 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, which has 40 high-rise architects, structural engineers, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, controlled demolitions, all laying out the evidence, which has convinced 99% of other design and fire professionals who have actually seen it to agree with us that, yeah, we need a real investigation based on the evidence for controlled demolition. Andy, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Well, no, that's okay, because I brought up a point on this, and this is going to be the next clip here, and I just want to sort of, I guess, peer review my point with the actual professionals here. So let me just go ahead and play that. It's about 30 seconds long. Because this is one of the things I think Craig is trying to get at, is that in the NIST reports, they acknowledge the damage on the corner of the building, but they say this only had a marginal role in I don't even remember the exact terminology, but it didn't have much of a role in initiating the collapse, because on the opposite side of the building, you have the penthouse that falls first, right? So they say that the collapse initiated on the side that was opposite from where this damage took place. And even though we don't agree with NIST's ultimate conclusions, we have to agree with that because of that penthouse that drops. All right. So what do you guys think about my point there? Is that viable? We'll start with Richard.
The east penthouse falls first. If you want to share
Sure.
We can look at that plan again. The east penthouse is above column 79 and 80 and 81. And in this area, they make a big point of it being caused by column 79. But Professor Halsey has found that indeed, even if you fail column 79 at the 12th floor, which is where NIST focused its attention for the initiation of collapse, the east penthouse couldn't fall in his model. I mean, there's how many floors? 47 minus 12. There's that many floors between the two. It would have, Kamal can explain this, the robust design would have absorbed any of that deflection or damage. So Professor Halsey calls it an isolated incident. In other words, maybe the explosives went off too soon, because there were explosions before seismic evidence, 10 seconds before the east penthouse even fell down. The seismic evidence is picked up. And even NIST acknowledges that. But they say that, oh, that's caused by the structural beams and so forth falling on the ground 10 seconds before the overall collapse.
Kamal, you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I agree with Richard. So basically, Leroy's conclusion. These buildings are designed with significant redundancies. In other words, that they allow, if part of the structure is weakened for any reason, the rest of the structure bridges over and is able to sustain carrying the load. And then, I mean, aside from that, of course, I mean, there's a huge amount of ductility in this building, meaning ductility means it's the ability of the building to bend and twist without actually falling apart. So, I mean, we're looking more at the crumbling scenario, which is not indicative or not a symptom of a failure of a steel frame structure without any help, so to speak. So it is a controlled demolition. That's a conclusion that Professor Halsey arrived at, and not only that, he explained his explanation is that all the interior columns were actually taken out first, and then a few seconds later, all the exterior columns were taken out. So there was a little lag between the two, and that could explain why the penthouse actually began to collapse ahead of the rest of the structure.
John, any comment?
No, I don't have anything more to add on that. I think they covered it well.
All right. So let's go ahead and get to this, because in this interview, Richard Rotanz is disputing the way that Building 7 came down different from how we have described it from our understanding of the videos, watching it from the north side. So let me go ahead and bring that up.
The way I can explain it is that here's my hand, here's the south, the north, and the building collapsed like a closing fist. And if you look at the damage, you can see the whole face of the north side of Tower 7 on the ground. So it came down, but it came down like a closing fist. If you look at the debris as the Tower 7 goes down, the north side of the tower is laying flat for quite some distance. So it came down like a closed fist. All right. It's not that symmetric, but it was closed fist. And that's where you saw, and most of that was into Vesey Street and on top of the plaza as well.
Now, when you say a closed fist, are you talking about it crumpling on itself? I'm trying to put it all together here, what you're saying.
It's going down like this. All right.
Okay.
It looks symmetrical, but it caves in on itself just before it hits the ground.
All right.
And that's
so
videos and pictures you have is from the north side. You don't have that from the south side. If you had that from the south side, a lot of this discussion would be occurring.
All right. Now, before we comment on that, I just want to play this is the closest that I could get to peeking around at the south side video that I have. And so I'm going to play the fast version of this, and then I'm going to play a slow-mo version of this so our engineers and architect can see this here. But here's the just the regular, I can get my mouse to work, there we go, version. And I circled it where it starts to come down here. Oh, no, I didn't actually circle it. Okay, so you can see it sort of start to tip over by the end there. Let's watch this again in slow motion. Let's see, here it is, slow motion. Okay, this is where I circled it. Slow motion, and again, we're not on the south side. It does start to tip forward a little as it comes down, and then the tip starts to get a little bit larger towards the end there. So with all of that played for you, we'll start with Richard. What is your reaction to Rotanz and the videos that I showed?
Let's also play this other video that I have queued up here for you, Andy, because this is the north side and this is the west side. Now, this is the south corner. You tell me if it's crumpling toward the south, meaning away from us, or not. Here we go. It looks like it's going straight down and symmetrically. And he was not in any position to see this collapse from the south side. So how he describes it as crumpling away from us is a mystery to me.
Well, it looks like it's going straight down for most of the fall. It does start to tip forward in that video that I showed by the end, but for most of this building's fall, and again, it's falling a free fall for 8 stories as well, which is an issue. But what I should have asked, and I don't do everything perfectly. I should have asked exactly where he was standing the moment that Building 7 came down. Were you seeing it actually from the south side? Were you watching it from the north side? Where were you, located on that day when it came down? I should have asked that.
Well, even all of our witnesses of explosions, which we have about 8, that I do want to play because I think that's important, because Richard Rotanz was unaware of any of them. And some of them one of them at least is FDNY. They all were on the north side. I think everybody who saw this building come down at 5:20 in the afternoon was kept away, and on the north side. I'm not aware of any witnesses from the south side.
Kamal, any comments?
Well, I find that interesting. So I think what the conclusion he's trying to arrive at is that gaping hole in the building had contributed to the collapse of the building, which maybe it may have contributed to some extent. However, after removing all the columns, it may have contributed. But if that gaping hole was the issue, then I would think the collapse would begin with the building tilting and not end with the building tilting. So it's not surprising that at the very end that the building could actually lurch to one side. But I mean, obviously this building had been assisted, so to speak, in actually bringing it down all the way before it starts lurching anyway. So.
John?
Yeah, I don't think that testimony is important to the facts one way or another. I mean, if that's the way it looked, that it was crumbling to the south, and it did go a little bit to the south as we saw in your video. But for the most, that video is controlled demolition, what we see, and it obviously wasn't done perfectly, which is no surprise because I guess there were a lot of mistakes made that day. But anyway, so. It doesn't negate anything we're saying, I don't think, or certainly nothing in Leroy Holsey's report, on the collapse of the building.
Well, these are the fires that are said to have brought that building down. I mean, these are the worst fires in the building.
Mm-hmm. And this is from the south side, right?
Yeah, this is the north side.
Okay.
The south side is full of smoke, and we don't have any good pictures of the south side. Buildings that are, if you don't get the controlled demolition just right, this is science. This is not like, I'll just take out a few columns and the building comes down. Look what happens if you don't get it just right. You get major problems like that. And the explosions stop going off. Somebody has to go back into this building and set that. Again, if a building is damaged on one side, it's going to fall to that side, like we see here. So,
well, and the other thing is and respectfully, because Richard Rotanz is a class act coming on the show, giving his testimony and standing with us, even if he doesn't agree with the conclusion, saying there's problems within this report. But even though that is the best video that I can get that can maybe give us a little peek around to the south side or get an idea of what's going on the south side, even though it starts to tip at the end, I wouldn't describe that as a closing fist. I close my fist. It goes like this. You would expect the top to be sort of wrapping around the holes and such, and to see something completely different than what we see here. And I think that would be impacting the north side view. Am I wrong? Your thoughts on my comment there?
I think with a building this size and all of the elements, there's just a lot of, what I don't know. The way it strikes me is what he saw was, there's plenty of room for that to have happened in this essentially straight down collapse. That I just see it as part of the, I don't know, what do you call error of the fall, I guess, essentially, something like that.
All right, let's get to the elevator shaft here, and we can bring this up in a minute, but I got to bring this up on my own thing because it's a big clip. So this is a long one here. But let's hear a little bit more about this elevator box. I want to focus in on this elevator box that was blown out from the elevator shaft. Now, I have a difficult time doing this myself, trying to come up with distances based off of memories and stuff. You say blown down the hallway. Like, what was this? Like 30 feet, 40 feet, would you estimate? Or would it be shorter?
I would say probably about 10 yards, 30 feet that it was down the hallway. The elevator shaft was gone for about 3 or 4 floors.
It was gone. Now, where was the elevator located in World Trade Center 7? Was it towards the exterior more, or was it towards the center?
It was the center core elevator that was found.
A little more clarification, if it's okay, on the elevator and the elevator shaft, because that I don't think a lot of people know about that, and so maybe you could describe like how you came across that damage and describe as best you can sort of what it looked like.
We came out of the staircase on the 8th floor, and this would be on the east side of Tower 7. We walked across, which we did every other floor, and we came upon an elevator car, which was about 20, 30 feet away from an elevator shaft that was not there. I could look up 3 floors. There was no floors. There was no elevator shaft. So this was blown out of the elevator shaft. Our main concern was there anybody in there? So we had some tools, forced open, and fortunately there was nobody in there. But that's it on that.
So there was so if you walked up to where the elevator had been, it was just a shaft, like an empty shaft?
There was a hole going down where the shaft was, and also going up a few flights. And the car was down the hallway on its side.
So what could have caused that hole? Like, what could have created that hole?
The debris coming down from Tower 1. That was the only thing that could possibly occur, was the massive amount of debris coming down from Tower 1 onto Tower 7.
But wouldn't that create a hole in the building that you could look out if it was from debris?
There was gaping holes in the side of Tower 7 that were the size of Mack trucks. All right. Right. And then where the elevator shaft was not too far from that south wall. There was a gaping hole there, and there was no elevator shaft, just an elevator car.
But would there be a connection between the shaft and the outside of the building, like where you could see that the debris had, hit the elevator? Like it's hard. I'm trying to picture it.
The debris that came from Tower 1 was everywhere, so we didn't have the time. We were there. Walk up 8 floors and walk 8 floors down. That's how long we were there. We were not there that long. We wanted to get out because the whole building was creaking and it didn't sound good and we didn't feel safe.
All right. So there that is about this elevator box being blown out there. I'll bring Richard's screen back up too here. We'll start with Richard. Comment on this elevator.
Well, so these are the elevators here in the center of the building. We don't know which elevator hoistway was blown open with a huge hole and the cab 30 feet down the elevator shaft. We do know that he was coming up out of this stairway on the east side of the core, which is really the center of the core. And so presumably he walked this way and looked this way, and maybe he did see some damage, or maybe he walked all the way down here and saw the outside of the building on the other side of the hole around the elevator hoistway, and saw the elevator cab here and saw maybe the damage on the outside of the building here, and immediately, as any of us would, I think, associate the damage in the center of the building around the elevator hoistway with the damage he was looking at beyond that on the south side of the building. I don't fault him for that. I think they're two separate incidences. Damage from the north tower would not blow an elevator shaft out, a cab out of its hoistway. and blow 2 stories in the center of the building, which is what Barry Jennings described, huge explosions in the building, in Building 7.
Kamal?
I really don't have much to add to this. That's not my expertise, the explosions and stuff. So I defer to Richard. He knows best.
Well, we know that Barry Jennings, there's been studies, detailed studies, that have shown us that the explosions that he experienced from the 6th to the 8th floor were well before the collapse of World Trade Center 1, the North Tower. So we just know by that timing that we're talking about 2 separate incidences.
John, any comments?
Yeah, I'd say too, as I think Richard is trying to make sense of what he saw, and he's looking for a reason. To me, it doesn't sound plausible that the debris would have come that far into the building and knocked an elevator shaft sideways. So it seems more plausible the explosions Barry Jennings was talking about is what did that. So it's just, it reminds me of how on the day of 9/11, when newscasters were asking, where's all the debris from the towers? Where's the 110 stories of concrete and steel? And people just, well, it's in the ground. I mean, they didn't know. They're just coming up with a off the cuff answer. That's sort of what it reminds me of. We're trying our best, but it hasn't been.
That concrete blanketed lower Manhattan, and it ended up in people's lungs. A lot of it. It was pulverized. Okay, on this next clip, I talked to Richard Rotanz privately long before this interview, and he doesn't have a lot to say on this. I think he's going based off of what he was told, and he wasn't really in charge of this aspect of it. But this gets into the water availability, and folks, there's a lot that we can say about the water situation and the ability to fight the fires at World Trade Center 7. And I don't know if we're going to do it justice here on this show, but at some point we ought to maybe invite the maker of Bravo 7, calling out Bravo 7, Paul Keeley, onto here to get into this much deeper. But let's just play the clip that showed up in the Rotanz interview. Well, first of all, who gave the order to evacuate the building? Because I guess there's a distinction between firefighter operations and evacuating. Would that have fallen under you or somebody else?
When I left Tower 1, going back in, I saw security. I said, pass it on that we got to evacuate 4, 5, and 7 and tell everybody to go north. That was around the beginning of the whole event. Around lunchtime, like 12:30 or so, we advised the chief of department, Pete Hayden, and other staff chiefs not to commit any manpower to Tower 7. It wasn't worth it. And there was no argument. They didn't commit anybody. And plus the fact we lost hydrant mains, gas mains, power lines, communication lines. We lost a lot of the infrastructure. So there wasn't any water going to be used. Well, first of all, there was no water pressure. There was loss of water to that area when the Towers 1 and 2 came down. Like I said, they broke hydrant mains, gas mains, electrical, and so on. So it wouldn't have been worthwhile to send anybody up there until they get some decent amount of water flow. Plus the fact you got to start pumping water up 40 some odd floors.
All right, so let's bring Richard's thing back up here, desktop if he needs it. But Richard, again, I know what I'm going to say to this, but what is your response to this water issue and whether that water was there to fight these fires?
Once Richard Rotanz sees the documentary film made by Paul Keeley called Calling Out Bravo 7, he will see lots of proof that there was water pressure at Building 7, including fat hoses that were tied to the hydrants around Building 7, leading to the pump trucks who increased that pressure to put out the car fires on the street in front of World Trade Center 7. He would see that the sprinklers were in action, interestingly, on or about the 8th floor, I believe, He identifies those floors in the film. And you can see through the windows the pressurized sprinklers gushing water out of the windows. And these are in the lower floors, not the upper floors, which were pressurized by tanks on top of the building. These were pressurized through the water system, the water delivery system, which comes from the north of World Trade Center 7 in 20-inch mains and flows past World Trade Center 7, then to the World Trade Center 1 and 2 and the other buildings. So the damage to the mains by the World Trade Center 1 and 2 would not have affected the pressure at all coming to World Trade Center 7 from the north, as was proven by the studies done of the pressure studies done by an independent lab that calling out Bravo 7 documents very well, that shows that there was pressure on that day for that building. They decided not to fight the fires for other reasons other than pressure. That was just the excuse that NIST used, that was passed around, that Richard Rotanz is repeating without any evidence to back himself up other than what he was told by others. And so we can't blame him for coming to those conclusions, but they're uninformed conclusions.
Yeah, and I know Roland was very interested in this water issue. Now, I took some notes from Bravo 7 and specifically about this water issue, and I'm not going to read them all here, but Richard already mentioned this, but mine just to summarize is the mains water supply in Manhattan was from north to south. Building 7 was positioned north and upstream of the Twin Towers. So Richard more elegantly explained that. That is just a summary. But that is a big point with me, and something that somebody defending this whole, there was no water to fight the fires point really has to address, because that doesn't make any sense. Kamal, any comments on water?
Not really. Again, I didn't study the water pressure, and so I can't comment on that. That's why I'm so glad that Richard's here. He can answer everything.
Not everything.
Everything.
Any comments?
Well, I remember it that way too, from past discussions we've had on this issue, that, like Richard said, there were water tanks on the top to supply the sprinkler system for some of the floors near the top, and then mains from the bottom to supply some. Now, and I had also, we had talked in the past that there was the fire suppression system had been put into test mode that morning by some unknown person. So when the fires were burning, I don't know when the water started to come out of the sprinklers, or if that was from the mains, but the water top, from the tanks of the building was not, the system wasn't working or what. But again, it was just a lot of very curious information, like so much of this day, about the water system, fire suppression system in the building.
All right. Well, there is a name that came up earlier when Richard was talking, Barry Jennings. So let's just go ahead, because this came up, I believe, during our interview, and I have it here, Barry Jennings timelines. Let's go ahead and play that.
So what I'm curious about is Building 7, like we heard from the account that Barry Jennings gave, that when he went into Building 7, it was completely empty. And I think he even said there were like half-eaten sandwiches or something when he went into the 23rd floor. So what I'd like to know is, how did that building get evacuated? Like, who gave the order to get everybody out of that building, and when did that happen?
When I went back to Tower 7 after setting up the command post with Joey Pfeiffer, I saw security, I go, listen, just tell 4, 5, and 7 to get out and go north. All right. That was, and they knew who I was. And I went up to tower, the 23rd floor. I told my staff to evacuate. Take what you have to get, go downstairs, and go north. That's where the evacuation started.
And that would have been, there would have been the whole building. It wouldn't have just been the 23rd floor, right? It would have been.
Security could evacuate the whole building.
Oh, I see. And that would be fairly early on in the morning after, because the North Tower was 8:46. It was hit, right? So how long after that would you have been doing that?
Probably like 9:10, 9:15 or so.
Okay, comments? We'll begin with Richard.
We should play the testimony of Barry Jennings because it is so relevant here. He arrives at the building after it had been evacuated. I mean, immediately after it had been evacuated, not realizing that it had been evacuated. He and Mayor Giuliani's attorney, Michael Hess, arrived late to the meeting on the 23rd floor of the Emergency Operations Center to a meeting they were called to, probably a meeting they were called to by Richard Rotanz. But they got there late. Everybody was gone. They got up there and he gets on the phone and somebody says, "You got to get out of there. There's bombs in that building," or something like that. And he was on the way down. He got to the 6th floor and explosions went off on the 6th floor. And it affected the stair rail that he was in, the stairwell. And I think he was on the, I don't remember what side Barry was on. He may have been in the same stairwell Richard Rotanz was in. So he then got back up, they climbed their way back up to the 8th floor. And they heard more explosions, and then he did see what Richard Rotanz saw, that he did say that the side of the building was gone. So that's interesting, and that's a detail that has to be resolved, because this again was before the tower, the North Tower had come down, and they were approached twice by firefighters to get them out. The first time the firefighters left and said, wait there. A building had come down. So then the firefighters come back after that first building came down, which was the South Tower. And they're trapped in the building. They had already had the explosions, and then the North Tower comes down, and then the firefighters come back and try and succeed in helping them get out of the building finally. So that string of events shows us that the explosions were inside the building, not a result of impacts to the building.
John or Kamal, any comments?
No, nothing more on that.
All right. Well, I wanted to make sure we touched on Barry. How can you talk about Building 7 without bringing up Barry Jennings? We got to do it.
We should play.
We should. I don't have the clip.
Yeah,
I think at the end of the show. Oh, you have it up. Okay, cool. Yeah. Let's do it. Here we go.
All right. Let's start here with Daryl, a medical student who's interviewed that evening.
We were watching the building actually because it was on fire. The bottom floors of the building were on fire, and we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out. Then, it was horrifying. And then, about a second later, the bottom floor caves out, and the building followed after that. And we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground.
A shock wave ripping through the building, a sound of a clap of thunder, the windows busting out, and then the building coming down. Presumably he was on the north side. So this gives you the order of events. Same with Kevin McPadden, former Air Force medic, as to what they experienced and heard before the building comes down.
You heard explosions, like boom. And it's like a distinct sound. It's not like when in compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. That, to me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
And what did Bill Rosati see before the building came down?
I was standing like 2 blocks away, and all of a sudden I just seen a big flash, and then I seen the building coming down, and I just seen people just running everywhere, chaotic like.
And Richard Rotanz, whom we heard from earlier, here he is interviewed on the National Geographic special.
Then he had to go into that building to...
Sorry, this is BBC.
Then he had to go into that building to assess it.
You could hear the building creak above us. You could hear things fall. You could hear the fire burning. You could see columns just hanging from the upper floors, gaping holes in the floors up above us. There was an elevator car that was blown out of its shaft, and it was down the hall.
And again, those elevator cars are on the inside of the building. He was in this stairway here. And so at some point, he saw that huge hole we talked about. And the damage was down here again in the lower left corner, according to NIST, which had a lot more witnesses to interview and photographs to review than did Mr. Rotanz. And then here's Barry Jennings. He was the deputy director of the emergency for the housing authority, which had he had a reason for being called to this emergency management meeting, along with Michael Hess. He happened to be with him as they entered the building late after it had been evacuated. This is their experience coming out of the building.
When we got to the 8th floor, I started walking to one side of the building. That side of the building was gone. The first explosion I heard when I was on the stairwell landing, when we made it down to the 6th floor. Then we made it back to the 8th floor. I heard some more explosions.
What's the sound?
Like a boom, like an explosion.
More than one?
Yes. We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. When we get outside, a police officer comes to me and says, "You have to run. We have more information of bombs, so you have to run."
More information of bombs. Bombs like this heard in the late morning of 9/11 in the vicinity of Building 7.
Yeah, here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
Now, everybody in the area heard that bomb. Everybody. So that's what I wanted to share, Andy.
Well, and that firefighter says, too, at the end, the 7 is exploding. We got to get out of here. I
mean, that's right.
Why does he think that? Why does he say 7 is exploding? He's not saying, oh, there's a gas main going off or a car backfiring. He says 7 is exploding. Something makes him think that. All right. We're going into overtime here, folks, but I really, really want us to go through all of these clips. Now, we're going to start getting to some things that even Richard Rotanz is acknowledging is a little strange, where he kind of comes over to our side a little bit here. So let me just go ahead and play this next clip. This is regarding a famous comment by Mr. Larry Silverstein, owner of the buildings, Building 7, the Twin Towers, talking about Paulette. We're sure that the audience is aware of this, but he was interviewed, I think on PBS, and he said, we couldn't control the fire. We thought the smartest thing to do was just pull it, and we watched the building come down. Later, when he was questioned about this, because pull it's a demolition term, he says that, I meant pull the firefighters out of the building. He doesn't refer to the firefighters as them. He says, pull it. That's kind of a strange thing to say. But anyway, This is what happens during our interview with Mr. Rotanz.
Well, the owner of a building, no matter regardless of what it is, it could be a bodega, it could be a school, it could be a high-rise building. That person, the persons, is very valuable to us to find out what do you have in the building. Is there any hazardous materials? Is there daycare centers and so on? What do we need to know? Standpipes, sprinklers, fuel, the whole bit. I don't know of any conversation that he had with the staff chiefs. I mean, like I said, I'm very concerned about where my staff was, how many people we lost, and to get the EOC up and running, which took a couple of days.
Okay, so you don't know how much of a role he really played in that call, but ultimately the decision is up to you and your team to make that determination, correct?
Up to the chief of the department, correct.
All right, very good.
Were there actually firefighters in the building, Richard? Like at any point? Like, in other words, the idea of pulling firefighters out, if there were never any in there, then that statement wouldn't make a lot of sense, would it?
The statement doesn't make any sense because when we went in there was nobody in the building at all.
Right.
Just us three. Earlier, you had people there that were, because you had federal agencies that had the CIA had a place, Secret Service, they had to get their stuff out of the building. Other than that, there's no firefighters were ever committed, to my knowledge, and I doubt it did happen to go into Tower 7.
All right, so there was never any firefighters in the building. So what is Larry talking about here? You pull first, you're pulling it, and then you say you're pulling them, but you said it, but now there's no them. If that makes any sense to the audience. No firefighters. So what's your next story, Larry? Richard, your comment.
Yeah, Richard Rotanz is on to something here too. NIST and FEMA both acknowledge that there was no firefighting effort at all. They wouldn't let them start firefighting. This was a decision that was made at top levels to not fight these fires. Maybe Richard Rotanz says he's the one that made that decision. Maybe he was. I don't doubt that. Maybe it's interesting. He says he made it because it was too dangerous, because of this damage. There was a lot of damage inside the building. He made that decision. I don't fault him for that. I don't say he's lying either, but I think it runs parallel to another decision made by a different group of people to not fight the fires in this building because they knew that it was going to come down. It had been, they had placed explosives in there. And maybe they set those explosives, I don't know, off in the middle of the building so that people like Richard Rotanz could go in there, see it, and make an independent assessment. This building is not safe for the firefighters to go in. There's a mystery there that we have to confront.
Kamal, Larry Silverstein says he really was referring to pulling the firefighters out, but there were no firefighters in the building. What's your response?
Well said, Richard. I think I don't have anything to add to that. I think it's interesting that it slipped. When he was interviewed, they probably didn't mean to say it in the first place, but
yeah.
I mean, he's backtracking on it now. Pull it, what pull it means, and pulling the firefighters or pull the building, or he probably meant pull the building and then decided to backtrack. Who knows?
John, any comments?
Yeah, it sounds like a very tangled web being woven.
Yeah, and part of me, I appreciate Richard Rotanz showing up and being on the document, the 9-page presidential commission for a 9/11 investigation, that one there. It takes a lot of courage to step forward and say, I don't know everything. In fact, I haven't reviewed any of their evidence, but I agree that a new investigation is not going to hurt us. I appreciate him for that very much. But this tangled web that John referred to, my guess, my suspicion is that Richard is inadvertently, either unconsciously or consciously, entangled in it.
Yeah. I was referring to the building owner, with this backpedaling and everything. And but people, it's just misleading to people.
Yeah.
Larry, Larry Silverstein, if you're watching this right now, I'm very confused. If you wanted to take another crack at this, just contact us. I'll be happy to give you a third chance at explaining it or them or you or what. But you're the building owner, and so what you have to say about this is pretty important. So let us know if you get any further clarification. I don't think
Andy,
you can call me though.
I won't. But I think when Richard Rotanz sees some of the foreknowledge of this building's collapse, for instance, if you want to share what I have queued up for you there, we have Chief Nick Visconti saying, we're moving the command post over that way, this way. That building's coming down. And sure enough, the building comes down later. Never have we in history have we lost a steel frame, fire protected building due to fire, and yet they're announcing that it's going to come down. Well, we then have Chief Pete Hayden announcing this.
Well, we had our special operations people set up surveying instruments to monitor and see if there was any movement of the building. We're concerned of the possibility of collapse of the building. And we had a discussion with one particular engineer there, and we asked him if we allowed it to burn, could we anticipate a collapse, and if so, how soon? And it turned out that he was pretty much right on the money, that he said in its current state you have about 5 hours.
Wait a minute. So now, not only does he know it's going to collapse, a completely unprecedented event, but in 5 hours. Now, if you asked Richard Rotanz, when is this building going to collapse? He would have gone like the rest of us. I don't know. Maybe never. But
Richard, can I jump in for 1 second? Roland and I spoke to Richard Rotanz several months before, and I did ask him about this phantom engineer that's advising the fire department on this, and he didn't know anything about this engineer. He couldn't say anything about it, didn't know anything about it. So I tried, folks. I didn't do it on camera, but I did try several months ago.
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question, Andy. This is pretty darn important. The prediction, of course, could only have been made with foreknowledge because it does collapse in 5 hours. Exactly. And so this is about noon. So this is about the same time that Richard Rotanz was in the building. Now listen to these mysterious construction workers walking away from building 7. These are not rescue workers. They're construction workers. Hearing an explosion over their shoulder, looking back at the building, and then looking straight into the CNN camera and saying this.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down. The building is about to blow up. Move it back. Here. All right, guys. Sorry. We are looking back. There's a building about to blow up. All flame, debris coming down.
Oh, so now the building's not only going to come down, and on its own, it's going to blow up. I mean, how do they know the building is going to blow up? That Richard Rotanz hasn't seen this yet, nor has he seen this particular experience of Kevin McPadden immediately before he heard those explosions that we heard earlier. He's now listening to a radio held in the hands of who he believed to be a Red Cross worker, and this is what he hears.
At the last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1.
What? Do fires bring buildings down to countdowns? What's really going on here? This is rather incredible set of incriminating evidence that could wake up somebody like Richard Rotanz if he has the courage to look at it, and he hasn't yet. But listen to the BBC announce when this building came down.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy.
sketchy indeed. There's the building standing behind her, and she announced its collapse 23 minutes early. Whoops, you're not supposed to do that. Well, CNN announced the collapse of this building at 10:45 that morning. Here's Alan Dodds-Frank.
In New York, Alan Dodds-Frank joins us on the phone in Lower Manhattan. Alan?
Alan, just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. I'm now out of sight. A Good Samaritan has taken me in on Duane Street. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And a firefighter who rushed by us estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon. Now, as I think Patty said,
50 stories went down. That's as close to 47 as you can almost get. Had this building gone down at that time in the morning, we wouldn't have any videos of it. We wouldn't have any photos. It would have been completely obscured by the massive dust cloud released when the Twin Towers went down. So some people suggest that it was supposed to go down at that time, and it didn't because it was a dud. And somebody had to go fix it. Maybe it was those mysterious construction workers walking away from Building 7 telling us the building is about to blow up. We got some real problems with the official narrative here, and I hope Richard Rotanz avails himself to this evidence.
You know, what gets me about the Jane Stanley video at BBC is that, and that your video cut out before this happens, but before the building actually goes down, they lose the feed. It just kind of poops out her feed. We're like, oh, we lost the feed. Because they don't want the building falling down behind her back like some kind of dark comedy, while she's saying it already came down. So that's just a very curious little fact about that whole segment as well. All right, I have one more clip to show, and this is basically Rotanz's view of the NIST report. Again, he wants a new investigation. He doesn't think NIST did a good job here. I just want to get your reaction to what he says. Let's talk about your critique of the NIST report, because you don't agree with what NIST did either. Can you describe why this is?
After, in 2002, I was asked by the county executive in Nassau County to help him build an office of emergency management. And with that, we had our office located in East Meadow, and I get a phone call from the county attorney that New York City Core Council wants to come and visit with me with people from NIST. Do you have a problem with that? I go, no, not really. So he shows up with 4 other PhD folks, very nice people, polite, and they're asking me questions just like you are about Tower 7. And they're trying to find out what went wrong. I go, well, do you have photographs? Do you have floor plans of the building? And he said, no. I go, so how are you going to come to this? What's your research question about what you're trying to look for? And what's your process of doing your research? They didn't have any floor plans, no photographs. And I was one of the first interviews. So I'm like, kind of questioning like what they're all about. I had floor plans. I had copied the floor plans of Tower 7, specifically of the 23rd floor. And I gave it to him. I go, here, take a floor plan. It'll help you. But you got to call up NYPD and then an FDNY to the photo units to see if they had any photographs of Tower 7 before it came down. I was beside myself. So they left. I get a phone call. I forget who was in charge of the of NIST at the time, saying thank you very much, the whole bit, but we're going to redo our report. Okay. But, the report they have is just, it doesn't grab me that they really did a good job. That's all.
Now, I want to get your comments on his story there, but even a guy who doesn't agree with our conclusions is saying NIST did a terrible job. And considering people died in the Twin Towers, and Building 7 is still this smoking gun mystery that still haunts this country through 9/11 Truth and Richard Gage 911 and so many other groups and people. Why not do a better job? Why not revisit this and correct the analysis? That's the argument that I go in with. And you know what? Richard, Kamal, John, most debunkers, most people who are on the fence on this really can't argue with that point. It's just so damn reasonable. That's why we need the new investigation. But your comments, we'll start with Richard on that story that was just shared.
Yeah, I think Richard Rotanz We should interview him again after he sees this evidence, because I think we'll have a very, very different interview.
Kamal, thoughts?
Well, the evidence is overwhelming. That's what I think. And I think it sounds like he has not seen it, so I'm not surprised. But I mean, if he has, he seems to be very interested in this topic. So I would encourage him to actually, yes, I mean, and we can interview him afterwards. That'd be awesome.
Good idea. We'll see if we can make it happen. John, any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think between groups like ours here, the firefighters for 9/11 Truth and others, they're getting people to look at this. And that's what happened with Richard. Frank got him to look at it, and he'll watch. He said he was going to watch Bravo 7, I think, in your interview. Yeah. And so he'll see more. He'll tell people about it, and more, influential people like himself, they're going to come to see what really happened.
Well, I love what we're doing here. We're building coalitions, even with people who don't agree with our conclusions, still calling for a new investigation into why these buildings just suddenly came down. Again, we got so many people throughout the 9/11 Truth movement joining in and writing this important document, all the authors' names here on the last page. And you can download that on our website. I think Richard's got it on his website as well, at Richard Gage 911. Yep. People can look at that, look at the arguments made there. I think we're going to have a version with pictures at some point as well, to sort of illustrate some points. But we're building coalitions here, and this is exactly what needs to happen to achieve our goals. So I am so proud of that interview, the fact that we got this to happen. And if we can follow it up, maybe we'll bring him on with Richard or something to hash out some of these points. Maybe his view will change after he watches Bravo 7 or other films. Or maybe they won't, but it'll still be a good dialogue, and that is what it should all be about. So, man, we have gone for almost an hour and a half here. That is like the length of a short movie, folks. So I'm just going to ask, is there any final thoughts before I give you guys a rest and let you get on with your evening?
Nope. Other than I'm excited about the momentum of the 9/11 Truth movement, the fact that we're working together again, AE 9/11 Truth and Richard Gage 9/11, and we're talking about Washington D.C. in September, and we're seeing if we can make something happen. We're working hard, and I've never felt more excited about the opportunity for breakthrough in getting a real investigation now that we have Senator Ron Johnson talking about a real 9/11 investigation, a sitting senator who we had the opportunity to spend 90 minutes with, giving him the evidence. And he did real good with that evidence on Tucker Carlson and on Redacted, I think it was, yeah. And so it's exciting. It's exciting. Hold on to your pants. If we don't have World War III between now and then with Iran, a flashpoint, pray for your leaders that they make wiser decisions than that they've been making.
Absolutely.
Amen. Amen on that. And yes, Ron Johnson is recalling this evidence. I mean, he sounds like somebody that could be coming to one of our conference calls or something. Oh, yeah, I just happened to be the senator from Wisconsin, the U.S. Senate. But no, this is amazing stuff, folks. We would have never imagined this happening 10, 15 years ago. It would have been a dream we would have woken up from and said, oh, wouldn't that be nice if that one day happened? So, folks, the websites are ae911truth.org, richardgage911.org. Get your evidence. Go share this show. Share the Rotanz interview. Share everything that you find on these websites. Richard's got a lot of good videos there as well. And spread the word, because stuff is happening in the world. We don't know which way it's going to go, World War III or 9/11 Truth. And I know there's other options as well. But you are the ones out there who are going to determine that, because worlds are made up of people with 6 billion, 7 billion now. I don't even know the number, but a lot of them have a lot of influence. So proclaim it loud and proud, but save the world through our evidence. I want to thank you guys for joining us here tonight on The Focus, and thank you out there for watching us. And we're going to be doing these again here with Richard joining our team, and John and Kamal. Great stuff here. Can't wait to do it again.
Thanks, Andy.
Keep the pedal down.